13 colonies with all of their own currency. Why do people want to create their own currency? Why does Visa want to have a stable coin? Because when you create a stable coin, it's backed by something. That thing
Right.
that it's backed by earns interest. And therefore, the issuer, in this instance, Visa, gets that interest. That's why Tether makes so much money. Circle makes so much money because the backing, they get the interest. So every company wants to issue their own stablecoin and make that interest. However, what's going to be taking place is technologies are coming that are going to enable the users, as I've described before, to earn that interest because the people who put the value into the system are the ones that should receive the value from the system.
From a revolutionary idea in 2014 to a $246 billion industry today, stablecoins have redefined how we think about money. In this episode of the Defiant Podcast, we sit down with Reeve Collins, co-founder of Tether, co-founder of WeFi, chairman at Stable, and a trailblazer in the Web3 world. Together, we explore the evolution of stablecoins, from their early days as a simple payment solution to their role in reshaping global finance and empowering financial inclusion. Blockchain technology is transforming the way the world moves money, and we're here to unpack it all. Welcome to the Defiant Podcast. Reeve, thank you so much for being here today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Tether was a groundbreaking concept when it was first introduced in 2014, and naturally we have lots of motion in the stablecoin markets these days. What inspired the idea of tokenizing the US dollar, and did you anticipate the massive impact that this would have on the crypto world?
You know, there was always the high hopes that you'd create something that could have such a significant impact, but you never know. And you have to rewind back to 2013, 2014. No one ever heard of it. Like, it's such a small group of people, and the prices just started being tracked in like 2013. People were just really on the fringes thinking that this is something very interesting. But what struck us as really revolutionary was the way that the money moved globally, instantly, and for free, right? But they were moving this new type of currency, Bitcoin, highly volatile, this weird type of foreign currency based in code. And so a lot of people didn't interact with it nor care about it. But the technology to move it was groundbreaking. So the concept was, let's move dollars, euros, yen on a blockchain. Let's move them globally, instantly, and for free and see what happens. We all knew how powerful and impactful that could be. And it's amazing to see that it's created the foundation for cryptocurrency. And now it's with all of the regulations behind our back, finally, after a decade, now the rest of the world is diving in. And so it's so interesting that after 10 years, stablecoin is the narrative right now. Everyone's excited about it. Everyone's trying to launch their own stablecoin because there's a new way to move money that's so much more efficient than the old way.
Yeah, I find it kind of shocking. I've only been in crypto for the last 5 years, but I was surprised when stablecoins became the thing that people latched onto, and that is starting to actually have more normies talking about crypto and talking about it in a positive way. I think, we've all heard all of the scam stories and, why buy an NFT when you can just save it to your computer. We've all heard the bad news and the bad headlines around crypto, but it's really interesting to see something finally coming into the spotlight and having a positive experience. Do you think it's because the dollar or like fiat currency is something that's already comfortable in the minds of the mainstream public, or do you think it's something else that's making it take off the way it is?
Well, absolutely. People are obviously used to dollars and their traditional currencies. And now if they can utilize those in a much more efficient manner, it provides a lot more benefit, a lot more value. There's this saying in technology that if something's not X better, it's not really going to change anything. People aren't going to quickly adopt. Well, moving money on a blockchain versus the traditional way is 100x better. However, it's taken this long to get there. Like, the best analogy is when we were little kids, we would write letters. We would put a stamp on it, we'd put it in the mailbox, and it would take a very long time for it to get there. But then email came. Email is 100 times better than sending a letter. And this advancement came out over 10 years ago, the blockchain, but it's taken at least 10 years for the rest of the world to catch up and for the regulations to be okay with it. But now that they are, people are realizing this is a huge leap forward. And what makes it work is stable coins. And so now everyone is diving into the stablecoin bandwagon.
They're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Yeah. So stablecoins are obviously very popular. It's grown to a $246 billion industry, which I mean is an insane number. And it's also playing a critical role, as we already know, in cross-border payments, in DeFi, and in financial inclusion. How do you see stablecoins continuing to evolve in the next couple of years now that we're finally kind of at that breaking point?
Well, that's one of the most amazing things and then one of the most amazing evolutions in cryptocurrencies and where this is going. So stablecoins started out static. You would give me $1, we put it in a bank account, we would issue a token that represents that dollar, and you could redeem it at any time. That was the
Right.
fundamental promise of stablecoins. And so they're asset-backed stablecoins. But now there's a lot more advancements, a lot more programmability, a lot more things that can take place. One of the most interesting advancements, what I call the evolution of stablecoins or stablecoins 2.0, is we're combining the RWA narrative. So right now, in addition to stablecoins, you're hearing everyone talk about RWAs. We're tokenizing all of these traditional assets that are coming on chain. Great. But what do you do with them once they're tokenized and once they're on chain? Well, if you tokenize a treasury, all it is a treasury that's held on chain. You still earn that yield, but you have to hold on to it, or money market funds, or all of the other assets that are getting tokenized. So
Right.
with the evolution of stablecoins, you get to blend both worlds, RWAs and stablecoins. So now you can use a tokenized version of a treasury as the backing for a stablecoin. So you can split the interest, put that in one yield-bearing token, and then utilize the principal to back a stablecoin. And what that does is it opens up a whole new world of assets that are available to back stablecoins. And more importantly, it solves a few issues. But one of the biggest issues is all of the users that put the value into the system. For instance, they put tons of money into Tether and into Circle, that 246, 60 billion or whatever, is people gave those companies money. Those companies are now earning all of the interest and the yield on it. And then people get to use the stablecoin. But now that RWAs and stablecoin 2.0 is coming online, the users are going to generate and keep that yield. And this is not a yield-bearing stablecoin. So it gets nuanced and you have to understand the details. But yield-bearing stablecoins is simply a tokenized treasury that you get that treasury, you get the yield, but you have to sit on it to earn that yield. It's also a security. So it's highly regulated and it's not freely traded. But with the evolution of stablecoins and new platforms coming online, like Stable, which is a platform that allows you to take these RWAs and utilize them as backing. Since it splits it, it's not a yield-bearing stablecoin. It's still a freely trading stablecoin, and you get the yield separately. So this is all to say that the evolution is coming. Technologies are being put in place where the users are going to reap the value, and they're going to do it in a way that's regulatory compliant and still can create mass adoption because people can bring the collateral online, get the interest, and utilize the stablecoin.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I see this as such a big win for the crypto industry because being able to offer products that are both quasi-familiar, like every investor understands yield, they understand treasuries, but then to being able to have it on chain, I feel like is just such a big win for getting crypto into more people's hands, as well as to getting people to have a little bit more of a nuanced conversation about it. And that's kind of been, I think, a big roadblock with crypto, right? It stays super niche, and then the terms aren't there to share it with a broader audience, especially an audience who, let's be honest, most people are tired and therefore a little bit lazy. They don't want to read the Bitcoin white paper. They don't want to know how this stuff works. They just want to be able to utilize it, right?
Everyone has their own feelings about the word crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin. So when you say that to people, people have different reactions. Some think it's a scam, they're just not interested. Some think it's the greatest thing in the world. So
Right.
let's just say it's right in the middle. And so there's a negative connotation saying, oh, now we're turning treasuries and money market funds into crypto. Well, you're not turning them into crypto. It's just a new technology platform for those same traditional assets to be worked with and to utilize. And this new technology platform adds incremental benefits. And what does that mean? It means that you are now going to have the same treasury and you're going to be able to get a little bit extra yield. Because when the treasury comes on chain, it gets more utility. And if something has more utility, it means it's worth more. So the levers that we get to fine tune is how much utility and how much yield, because you don't want to increase the risk too much, but you still want to increase the yield. So essentially, for for traditional people that are used to traditional assets, the fact that they're all coming on chain, it's going to make those assets better because there's more utility and they'll get more yield out of it without going too far up the risk curve.
Yeah, and I think when we think about the Trump administration making changes about, for example, Ks, I'm sure there are plenty of people who are, let's call them 60 years old, and they're like, wait, I don't want volatile Bitcoin in my life. That's crazy. What if I lose everything? Well, this could be another entry point, right, for what it means to hold crypto in your 401k. It could be something nice and boring, like a treasury, or something familiar, like stocks on chain, right? So I'll be really interested to see like what exactly that looks like as we start to introduce more and more crypto into these strongholds of the financial lives of Americans and people all around the world.
You bring up a very good point there. The fact that they're allowing the inclusion of tokenized assets into your 401k, it doesn't mean just, oh, you're holding Bitcoin. It means you're holding this whole new suite of products, which the RWAs are traditional assets brought on chain, but they're going to have incremental benefits. And so then you can hold those products in your 401k, and it's just going to increase your yield. So yeah, it's a really exciting time. And I always encourage people, Bitcoin is kind of the foundational asset. And so if you're going to get involved, it's always good to have some Bitcoin. And a 401k is a great place to hold any asset due to the tax treatment of it and everything else. So I think it's wonderful that's moving forward. And the Trump administration has done more for crypto. It's probably been the biggest boon that crypto could ask for. The forward, all the momentum that they're bringing to crypto, because the last 10 years the government was so against it and trying to squash it, and it really stifled the innovation. And it really, any traditional company would not touch crypto because they were just going to get in too much trouble. That's over. So even though the regulation isn't quite there, all the companies, big banks and institutions, they're all leaning in now, knowing that they can still maneuver and operate in that area, even though the regulations aren't quite there, because they're not going to get in trouble because they know the regulations are coming. Whereas in the past, it was just an absolute no.
Yeah, it's say what you will about the Trump administration, but more things have happened in 2025 on this front than ever, so we'll have to see the long-term effects of that. And I'd love to touch on, like you said, there are these major players that are coming in. So JPMorgan, Wells Fargo, Visa, and MasterCard, just to name a few, are entering the stablecoin space. And the Genius Act is really clearing the path for many more players to come on in. Specifically for more banks to even issue their own stablecoins. How fast do you think real change is likely to happen, specifically in like the financial services industry?
It's a great question. And people used to always ask, they'd say, I don't understand crypto. I don't understand Tether or Bitcoin or any of this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, you don't need to.
Yeah,
Because
don't worry about that. Leave that to us.
Well, do you really understand intimately how your bank works? Probably not. A lot of people don't, but they trust the bank moves their money. And so what I've shared in the past is the evolution of blockchain, what it's going to do for you, and the examples you just brought up, JP Morgan, Visa, and all these companies issuing stablecoins. Is this coming true? Is my prediction coming true? Which is your services are just going to get faster, more efficient, and better. You're still going to use the same bank. Let's say you bank with Wells Fargo. Well, now instead of wires taking 3 days and costing $40, soon they'll be instant and cost 50 cents, right? And step one in getting there, well, right, because we can do that already in the crypto world, but you can't do that in the traditional world. The traditional world, now that the regulations are getting ready, are finally catching up. And step one, to move money and give that level of efficiency to its users, those banks need to use a stable coin. So at the moment, they're all issuing their own stable coin, and soon there'll be thousands of flavors of stable coins. And then there'll be these big settlement layers that allow you to instantly switch from one to the other. And then ultimately, there'll just be this, it's not going to matter the brand of stable coin, because we're going to utilize AI to do a lot of the transactions. So the user only cares about moving money from one place to the next in the fastest, cheapest manner. They don't care if they use Visa's stablecoin or JP Morgan stablecoin or Circle. They just care that it moves. And the infrastructure will be there on the back end to seamlessly find the best path. What's the fastest and cheapest path for the user to do this? That's coming. But step one is now the banks create their stable coins, and then they offer that efficiency of using a stable coin to their users, meaning the users have a better service.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot over the last few weeks. The fact that we're going to have so many different stablecoin issuers, like in your perspective, does that ring true similar to like when we had 13 colonies in the United States and each colony had their own currency? Or it's sounding like they're maybe going to be a lot easier to transact, because the thing I'd be worried about is, yes, they're all going to be worth $1 if that's what they're aiming for. But like from a technology perspective, what are the obstacles with there being so many different kinds of stablecoins?
It doesn't
If
really
any.
bring up obstacles per se, right? It's not really obstacles because the technology is there. Everyone can issue a stable coin. And so the next is the usage. But you actually had an interesting analogy there. 13 colonies with all of their own currency. Why do people want to create their own currency? Why does Visa want to have a stable coin? Because when you create a stable coin, it's backed by something. That thing
Right.
that it's backed by earns interest. And therefore, the issuer, in this instance, Visa, gets that interest. That's why Tether makes so much money, Circle makes so much money, because the backing, they get the interest. So every company wants to issue their own stablecoin and make that interest. However, what's going to be taking place is technologies are coming that are going to enable the users, as I've described before, to earn that interest. So
Right.
one of the companies that I'm the chairman of, stable.com, that's the whole concept is specifically that, which is to create a technology that allows users to post collateral and they get the interest. And over time, those types of technologies are going to be the ones that attract the most volume because the people who put the value into the system are the ones that should receive the value from the system.
What a concept.
I mean, it's a great concept, but it's never actually been possible before. That's one of the most incredible features of blockchain systems is that it enables that because now we have the currencies to do micro payments and micro rewards or where before that was really difficult. Not only was it difficult to make the payment, but it's difficult to understand who should get paid. But all
Right.
of those things are built into these new systems, and therefore in the future we have the ability to give the value to those who deserve it.
The PR Genius is a top crypto PR and growth marketing agency, helping brands globally with expert PR and strategic growth marketing. They've worked with 300 plus projects like Movement Labs and IO.net. Unlike traditional agencies, they charge only on performance. Their services include earned PR opportunities and marketing services to help boost wallet holders and organic X followers. Learn more at www.theprgenius.com.
I mean, I remember opening my first savings account when I was like 16 years old, and I was so excited to have my own money and put it in there. And then I saw the, APR for my savings account was like 0.01%. And even as a teenager, I was like, wait, what? Like, you're holding my money and I get near nothing? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So it's like really exciting now to be having these conversations where we are talking about how does the end user be the one that gets the benefits here? How do we pass that on to the consumer rather than just the costs of, whatever it is, inflation, tariffs, et cetera? So it's an exciting time. And I'm glad that this is something that's at the forefront of builders' minds today, because I think it's been lacking in traditional financial institutions, clearly.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I'm most passionate about is delivering on the promise of blockchain and delivering on the promise of Web3. And really what that enables is that those who contribute the most should receive the most. We now have the technology to remove the middleman. That is what blockchain is for, is to remove the middleman to make things more efficient. And when that happens, it means more value goes to the end users. And so these technologies are getting to the stage where they're easy enough and where people can understand how to use them, where they really will start receiving the value.
It's a good incentive to me. So as stablecoins are kind of entering this new phase, shifting from a simple payment rail now, we're talking about yield-bearing assets, user-centric financial instruments. How do you see this evolution impacting the dominance of early centralized models like Tether?
I mean, look, think about television. Way back in the day, there was just a couple channels. And then cable came and there was a bunch of channels. And then the internet came and there's an infinite number of channels, of ways for individuals to divert their attention. So in the beginning, there was one channel, Tether. So it got all the attention, it got all of the money. And then a few more came, and now there'll be 1,000. So just like that analogy of television and where our attention is diverted, there's millions of ways for us to consume content now, millions of different channels, all the way down to individual content creators that one person can follow. So it just depends on what appeals to you. Which one of those channels, or in this instance, stable coins, is going to attract the most users because of ease of use or brand recognition or who makes the most money. And so now there's going to be lots of competition out there. So absolutely over time, it's going to significantly impact the incumbents because there's just more and more opportunities and options for users to use alternative tokens, and they're going to use the one that makes them the most money. And one more thing to touch on, and this is my belief, is again back to AI. With the utilization of AI in our wallets and optimizing how we do transactions, brand is going to matter less because the AI doesn't care about what brand. It'll care about safety, but it's going to care about, speed and cost. And so really the best products are going to win in the end.
We're just following the numbers, guys. It's nothing personal. I'd love to switch gears a little bit to talk more about decentralized banking and financial inclusion. I know that's something else that you are really passionate about and doing a lot of work towards these days. So speaking towards unbanked populations, that's still a huge number. There are about 1.4 billion adults still unbanked globally, which is like kind of insane to think of. And so you've mentioned that decentralized banking can succeed where traditional microfinance has fallen short. Can you elaborate a little bit on how blockchain and stablecoins can address this gap?
Absolutely. I'm the chairman of a company called WeFi, which is really on the forefront of decentralized banking. And it's something I'm also very passionate about because, again, the promise of blockchain was to bank the unbanked. The promise of Bitcoin was to provide a currency to people around the world that didn't have access to quality currencies before. Stablecoins have really stepped in because that's one of the most incredible things about Tether was that it provided the rest of the world easy access to US dollars.
Right.
And when you stack rank the 180 plus currencies of the world, there's 10 that are pretty good, but if you're anywhere below there, you would love to easily swap out your currency for a US dollar because it's
nobody wants a peso, Reeve. I can talk from experience.
Yeah. And so we talk about the unbanked, and so there is a large population of the world that's unbanked. And yes, there's the poverty level that is always going to be hard to penetrate. So we're really talking about people that at least have access to a cell phone because now we have the ability to provide world-class, not just high quality, but really world-class banking services on a phone, in an app.
Yeah.
And so it's really just getting that penetration now, and the tools and the ease of use to use cryptocurrency is finally getting there, in the security where people that have a lower level of education, but they do have their cell phone, like we can really make it simple, easy to use, where they get to now have a bank in their pocket. And why is that? Well, as I shared, the whole concept of blockchain technology is to make financial transactions more efficient. The whole concept of stablecoins is to bring stable currencies, in this instance, dollars or euros and yen, whatever currency that population would like to use, and format it for the blockchain. And when that stable currency is formatted for the blockchain, then you can use dollars on the blockchain. And so they're used on this much more efficient platform. And when that happens, you can then offer these financial services to anybody with a cell phone connection. And also, the phone has the ability to have your identity. So we all use our phones now as two-factor authentication.
Right.
And so a big issue in the past, especially for banking, is KYC and identity. And so we can start utilizing tools to really help people get a digital identity as well, which is also very important in banking. So they'll have a digital identity and then a stable coin and then the banking services. And that what that really does is it connects the rest of the world. It connects the underbanked to good financial services, because the underbanked is a big population where they might have a bank somewhere, but it's very difficult to get to, or those banks don't want to service them. And the reason why the current financial infrastructure and system doesn't want to service all these customers, it's not because they're bad people, it's just they're not profitable. It does not make sense to service these customers. They don't have enough money. But
Right.
Again, when you can do it with technology and it costs you nothing to service that customer, then if they only have a few dollars a month, that's fine. You can still give them a place to store that money, to transact with that money, enable them to save, enable them to even invest that and just earn a little bit. And it plugs those people in to the global financial system, which these types of opportunities have never really been available before. So it's a really exciting time for financial services to connect to the rest of the world.
Absolutely. And if there's, an option in this kind of mobile first, decentralized finance idea where we can have a little pop up there saying, hey, get some stable coins and earn 5% yield. I mean, that's literally the first step into that little bit of financial education. The concept of making money on your money, is revolutionary to at least 1.6 billion people, right?
And that's a great point because that absolutely will be the first feature of most of these products, which is a high yield checking account. It's not even your savings account because most of them are just going to have one account. They're going to put their
Right.
money in there, but they're actually going to earn a couple percent on that money. So that's definitely coming.
I mean, that's boom. That's a brain blast right there. And we're not even talking about anything super technical or fancy.
Exotic.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then we'll get them on the pipeline to, MakerDAO and leverage and
Baby
collateralized
steps.
loans. So you've also spoken about how, the next wave of financial inclusion is probably going to be mobile first, as you've described here, also wallet native and non-custodial. So what does this look like in practice, and how can it be scaled in order to serve underserved regions?
Well, there's two pieces to that. One, the custodial and non-custodial, that's a little technical and it will more be an option because if people want to have custody of their own money, it's great, but a lot of people need some hand holding. So custodial wallets are
Yes.
also very beneficial. It just depends on the individual's tastes and how they want to hold their money. So that piece aside, yes, it's mobile first, it's decentralized. And again, the tokenization, where there's also governance tokens of these types of communities, allow real rewards and real earning to go back to the community. We all know about co-op banking, where a lot of those fees, people are owners in that bank and they receive some money. But now we have the ability to do that via tokens. So when these new companies come out, with these new on-chain banks come to market and they offer a token, well, that token enables all of the individuals to earn incremental rewards for participating in the community. It's kind of what I was sharing before. It's like, this is the promise of Web3. The promise of blockchain is efficient transactions that connect the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
The promise of Web3 is a wallet with tokens where you can receive ownership for your actions. And so when you combine the two of those, which is efficient banking and then rewards and ownership, you have something really powerful because you can do it in an app that's available to anyone in the world with an internet connection. And they just download that and then they can participate. They can deposit a little bit of whatever their savings is, and they can do it in whatever token they want. And then if they want to also buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or buy some cryptos and invest that way, they can. But if they just want to utilize their currency in a stablecoin format just to do their basic living, they're going to be plugged into this system that's much more robust than whatever it is they had available to them before.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, the last point I want to touch on in this part of the conversation is, I think the driving force here really is about trust. I really love Bitcoin for a lot of reasons, but partially because it was fighting against a lack of trust in the traditional banking system, that was brought on by the 2008 financial crisis. And similarly, there are a lot of people who don't feel comfortable with Bitcoin and other crypto because they lack trust, right? So it's kind of like a big theme when it comes to money. I think obviously because money is such a big part of our lives, for better or for worse. So how do you think that blockchain projects specifically can build trust in communities that have historically been underserved by traditional financial systems?
Well, it's a great point. And it goes back to the analogy of hundreds of channels. In this instance, it's hundreds of places to put your money. So there's always going to be a lot of competitors in this space. And so
Yeah.
whichever one resonates with the end consumer, that's the one that they're going to trust. So how do you build that trust? Well, there's the traditional ways. You build the brand. But in this area, you really want to be the most transparent and really showcase how you go about doing what you're doing, what the controls are, what the audits are that are there. And now that everything's on chain, it is much easier to be transparent, especially in stable coins, because It's not that Tether or Circle and these other large companies don't want to be transparent. They actually really do want to be transparent, but it is very, very difficult. Some people might say, oh, it's not that difficult, but it is actually very difficult to be that transparent when you're dealing with that many or that large of dollar amounts, right? 100 billion dollar plus spread across banks all around the world and held in different places. It's very complicated to be completely transparent for any large organization like that.
Right.
However, this is why I talk about stablecoins 2.0, because if you use a tokenized RWA, a tokenized treasury to be the backing, then it's very easy to be completely transparent because 100% of your reserves are on chain. And so there is no third party audit needed. It's like I have $10 billion of treasuries and money market funds and these other RWAs that have been tokenized. Here's the custodian, here's where they're at. Here's all the data on chain that says it's backing this $10 billion of stablecoin in circulation. And so that transparency for stablecoins is definitely going to be solved here very soon in this kind of evolution of stablecoins, stablecoin 2.0. And then how does a banking system build trust with this community? It's just building that community, building the brand in that sense, because that's when they're going to come in and choose you as the brand to be their bank, and then just do right by the community. And how do you do right by the community? You utilize the tools that empower you as the centralized company to issue all the rewards and a lot of the profits back to the community. And so that's what's going to build trust over time.
So what I'm hearing is TradFi can use a facelift, and maybe crypto rails can be that facelift.
Well, 100%, but there's a challenge there. But you're correct. TradFi is going to lean into crypto rails and utilize it. But their business models have been, they're entrenched. Their business models have been, they're decades old, and they're public companies, and they have to make all of this money for the shareholders, and they have to increase and pay for massive amount of overhead, right? All of the traditional branches and infrastructure. And so purely crypto native startups, these new companies that are coming that are really just built on chain and built from an ethos from the beginning to give all of that money back. And so their business model is only to take a small sliver, not the entire stack. They're just going to win the race because they're going to utilize the technology more efficient. Their costs are going to be much, much, much less than the traditional companies, and they're going to be able to reward the communities in ways that traditional companies cannot compete with.
And like the marketer in me is just like thinking about what an amazing word of mouth opportunity this is going to be. I mean, this makes me think of like, I remember when I first started working in crypto and I was like, okay, how do I upgrade my financial education? And one of my friends was like, oh, you should try this credit card. It has great rewards. That is the most effective way, I think, of like sharing these products is when people are like, this worked great for me. I'm going to tell my mom and my cousin and all of my friends, and my mentees. Like, I just see this as such a huge opportunity for that kind of like community-based and community-driven growth. I think whoever gets there first is going to really have a good day, a good couple of days.
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk about stable.com. Specifically, I know we were talking just recently about, kind of the intersection of RWAs and stablecoins, which I find to be really fascinating because right now we're still at the time where we're talking about, stablecoins being backed by USD or by treasuries. So are there any challenges that you foresee in integrating RWAs into blockchain-based stablecoins? What are some things that are being done to address these challenges in the companies that you're advising, that you're a part of?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. And it's STBL.com. I just always have to make that point that out because we're using the Web3 spelling, STBL.
Stable.com.
Yes, stable.com. We're very edgy. But I believe that what we're bringing to market with STBL.com is stablecoin 2.0. It's just the evolution of stablecoins. It's the future. Because as I kind of shared, it's not a yield-bearing stablecoin, but it's a stablecoin infrastructure that empowers those people who are bringing the value into the system. Think about a traditional stablecoin. The people you would give Tether $1, you get a stablecoin, but you don't get the yield Tether does. But Tether would buy a treasury and they'd keep the yield. But now those treasuries are on chain. we've created an infrastructure, a system that allows the user to, instead of give the system a dollar, give the system a treasury, a yield-bearing asset, a yield-bearing RWA. And since the user is the one that put that into the system, they get the yield. And it mints a freely trading stablecoin. It mints a non-yield-bearing stablecoin because the yield's been split. The person who provides the collateral gets that. And then there's a stablecoin that's used in the system. And so that nuance, there's two nuances there. One, that the person who puts the money in gets all of the rewards. And two, that the yield is split, where it's not a yield-bearing stablecoin, but it's a separate token. That makes sure that this stablecoin is very compliant and can be traded without having to be whitelisted and not being a security.
Yeah, so that was going to be, that's something I've been thinking about throughout this conversation. I remember a couple of weeks ago, there were some banks that were basically saying, wait, people are offering yield on stablecoins. That's not fair. So the Genius Act, specifically says, okay, the stablecoin issuer, for example, Circle or Tether, can't issue a yield-bearing stablecoin. But what you're describing is, I don't want to say a workaround, but we can use Coinbase, for example, right? If you own USDC, you can get yield on it. So technically, it's the exchange offering it, not Circle. And so do you have any fears or concerns about, regulation coming in to shut down what has been described as a loophole? Or do you think that these structures are, transparent and strong enough to stand up and be like, hey, we're not doing anything wrong. We're literally creating financial products. Catch up.
That is great insight, and you're spot on. It's so crazy to me. So the regulations come out and said, okay, great, you can do stablecoins. And then all of a sudden, the banks and that whole lobbying conglomerate or the traditional financial system said, no, they can't do yield-bearing stablecoins. You can't give yield because that'll destroy our business. The only reason,
right, because it'll hurt me. Wait, the consumer's not on your mind at all. How shocking.
That is it. That is it. And so what that means is it's inevitable that it's going to happen. It might not happen now because they might win with the regulations, but over time, the consumers demand it because the technology's there, everything's there, but then, this one person had a little sway, and so they got the regulations to say you can't do that. That might hold for a while, but over time, it will disappear because the technology is so much better. The consumers are going to demand that they get the yield because it's so programmatic, so easy, and everyone else around the world is going to be doing it. They'll just sandbox it outside of where the regulations are against it, and they'll be like, hey, this makes no sense. The best analogy for stuff like this is Uber. Uber was essentially illegal, right? They had to fight battles in every city, every state, every country, just because the taxis, the incumbents are like, you're taking all my business. And what they were doing, like the way the laws were written, was illegal, but Uber won, hands down. It took some time and there was a lot of feedback and a lot of battles, but over time they won. Why did they win? Because the consumers demanded it, and that was the only reason they won. If their product was inferior, they would have had zero chance of winning, but it was so much better. And that we're in the same kind of space. And so this battle of the regulation saying you can't do yield-bearing stablecoins, you can't do this, is step one of those arguments. And they might win, but it won't last because the technology's there. It won't last. Yeah, the technology's there, and the consumers are going to demand better products and better financial services.
I mean, it's about damn time, guys. And I think as soon as consumers get that taste of something better, I mean, you try taking that away from me. You try getting my Bitcoin out of my cold, dead hands.
That's right.
You've been a pioneer in the blockchain industry for over a decade. What excites you the most about the future of this technology, and where do you see the biggest opportunities, whether they're things we've talked about today or anything else that we didn't touch on?
Yes. The shift in the regulatory landscape and the fact that we have the president of the United States so behind crypto, that makes me very excited because it finally paves the road for the mass adoption. And when you look at these digital asset treasuries, so there's another company that I'm involved in, Reserve One, is a digital asset treasury company. We recently raised $1 billion and to deploy in crypto. So it's a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ, and it will be here at the end of the year when it all comes together. And so it's a start of, you're seeing this big surge of public companies holding Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies on their balance sheet. And what that signals, and what's really incredible about that, is that it's really mass adoption and acceptance from the traditional world that crypto is going mainstream. So now when a public company can just hold crypto, which then allows people to call up their stockbroker and say, hey, I want exposure to Bitcoin by this public company, that really creates the mass adoption that we've been hoping for. And that's just in the US. And so you're starting to see these types of DATs, the digital asset treasuries, roll out on exchanges all around the world. And then in addition, you're seeing different countries all starting to state that they're doing a Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Right.
That just global shift in sentiment is one of the most exciting things. And then the new technologies that are finally reaching the masses, like the ability to provide on-chain banking to the masses, the ability to provide stablecoins that really work for the users to the masses. All of these things are very exciting to me because ultimately doing those things delivers on the promise of blockchain and of Web3, which is something I've been passionate about since the beginning.
And will be until the end. Let's be real.
Yes.
Reeve, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such an insightful conversation, and I'm really excited to follow everything that you're working on and all the success to come, both to you and to the broader ecosystem.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, and we all have a bright future ahead of us.
That's right. Thank you for tuning in to the Defiant Podcast. If you like this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with all the technology enthusiasts in your life. And join us next week when we'll be talking to Justin Kenna and Ryan Zur about how a Jerry Jones-backed media company is rewriting the playbook for corporate crypto adoption. But until then, stay tuned, stay informed, stay defiant.